Everyone, come on in and grab a seat, because right now we are about to discuss Ready to Love Miami season, and we are talking about this interview that Chris Alexo did with Samson. I know I'm late covering the Samson interview. I don't know how I missed it, but thank you, all of you, pointing out to me that I need to circle on back and watch this interview, because I am so happy that I watched the interview, because I did learn a lot about Samson. But before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop down in the comments on this video. But I definitely want to get right into this video. And one of the things I've been doing on all these videos when I've been reviewing the different interviews is I started off with, did they get a good edit or did they get a bad edit? And if you've been watching any of my different interviews, commentary on the interviews, I've given out some good edits. I've given out some bad edits. I gave out a split decision. I think I get a split decision with Jamala. I said that Kayla was the editor because I thought that what Kayla did was she took the whole season and she edited the whole season herself. And now I got one here for Samson. Good edit or bad edit on Samson? I'm going to say this. Samson edited himself throughout the show. He didn't need an edit. You know, after you do something, you go, oh, wow, it's perfect. We don't need to edit it because he's already edited. Samson edited himself the entire season. The entire season. He tempered his words. He gave the politically correct answer. He never always told what he was really thinking, because I don't think that Samson wanted to say some of the things he really wanted to say because it would be a bad look. Now remember, Samson is a life coach, okay? So life coaches are supposed to encourage you, uplift you, motivate you to be better people. I don't think it would look good for Samson, and if he went out here really speaking the real truth on how he felt about these women, it would be a bad look for his business. So what Samson decided to do was, I'm not going to tell the truth. What he did was he says, I would rather sit on this show and lie than to tell these women the truth on how I really feel about them. That's what he did. He said, because I'm not going to ruin my business and my reputation speaking truth to these women, because if I really tell them how I really think, they're going to get their feelings hurt. That is the truth with Samson. And the truth of the matter is he's absolutely correct, because when any person has been on this show, any of the men have been on this show and they try to tell women the truth on why they were not attracted to them, the men have been attacked. Let's be honest with it. There's this thing where people want to hear the truth unless the truth is bad. Then they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear the truth. They only want to hear the truth if the truth is good. The one thing I tell everybody, if you watch my videos, is put a bullet in my head. Put a bullet in my head. Because I think when you hear the truth, although it stings you, although it hurts, one is you still get the decision on whether you want to receive that from someone. You don't have to receive everything people say about you. But if you do receive it and you say, wow, that is something about me, it gives you an opportunity to change, to grow, and to be better. But some people, they never really want to hear the truth. They really want to stay out where they are, because then they don't have to do anything differently. So if you edit yourself and never tell me the truth, then I really don't ever have to do anything. Well, one of the things that happened to Samson is he said that from the very beginning, from the very first time that he walked on to that pool party, he didn't want to be there. He said he knew right away that none of these women were from him, period. So what he tried to do was he tried to go to the producer and say, hey, you know what? I need to be one of the first ones eliminated. He says, you need to get me the heck up out of here, because I walked around, I've talked to these women, and I'm not interested in none of them. None of them. Haven't y'all ever had that moment back in your day when you went to a party or a club? I have. Back in my day being single, I'd been to a party, a club or something. I walk into the club or the party. I make a round. I talk to different people. And I say, I ain't interested in none of these men up in here. Girl, let's go home. None of these men up in here piqued my interest. And you know what I've done? I might have spent an hour getting ready for that party. But you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to waste another 2 hours at the party him high and talking to a bunch of people, men that I'm not interested in. I leave. I say, yep, I wasted my hour getting dressed for this party, but I'm not going to waste another 2 hours of walking around in this party. I'm just going to go ahead and leave. And me and my girlfriends, we got in our car and we left. Well, Samson tried to get in his car and leave, but they wouldn't let him. So this is equivalent to you going to a party, you get into the party, you don't like nobody at the party, you're really not interested in none of these people, but they lock the door on you. And that was Samson. Samson got locked in the closet with all these women, and he wasn't interested in any of them. So then he had to figure out, well, how do I get along in this closet with all these women, and I really don't like none of them? You know who else that happened to? A Calvin. Okay, I wholeheartedly believe now that Calvin felt the same way, but what Calvin did was he lied. Calvin said, my mama's sick and I got to get off this show, and Calvin bounced. But Samson, he didn't know how to lie because he's a church boy. So he didn't come up with no clever lies, so he had to stay locked in the closet with all these women. I'm going to tell you this, that first party, that pool party, did so much damage to these women. It did a lot of damage to these women. It set these women in a really, really negative light from the beginning. And it made a lot of people come to conclusions about some of the women and set them in an environment that didn't help them. The whole downfall and the demise of Dominique in the beginning was helped along with the drinking, the alcohol, and the atmosphere of the party. They didn't meet at some type of cocktail party where everybody was dressed nice and beautiful. A lot of the past seasons, when everyone showed up, they showed up looking nice dresses, nice outfits, nice attire. Okay, sure, they were serving wine wherever they were. Sure, there were drinks being served. But this first party that they did in Miami did not help the women at all. It hurt the women. And what it did was it really involved a bad atmosphere. It's almost like, you know what, when you're in corporate America and you go to a Christmas party and there be people at the Christmas party in corporate America that they really do think they at a barbecue and don't realize, yeah, we're at a party, but it's still a corporate party. But it's always those one or two corporate people who get up on the table and start dancing, who really think, do you really think that this is a backyard barbecue? They say have fun, but girl, you being watched. Do not be up on that table dancing and twerking at a corporate event, and your boss is looking at you. That's what happened at this pool party. These women forgot that they were being judged. Okay, they forgot that they were being evaluated, and they let their guards down too much. And I believe there was probably more than one man or two men that felt the way Samson felt, and also the way Calvin felt. I really do believe there were more men than that. But it just so happens that Calvin got to go home because he came up with a good lie. And Samson, because he's the church boy, his lie wasn't quick enough. So then what Samson decided to do was, since I couldn't lie to get off the show, I guess I better keep lying throughout the show. Because here's the problem. Once Samson knew he didn't want to be on the show, he could never really tell the truth why he didn't like any of these women. He could never really tell it. I know everybody wants to say the reason why Samson didn't like these women was because he likes so-called non-black women. He likes Latino women, or he likes white women. I don't believe it. Because even Samson said the majority of his girlfriends, the vast majority of his girlfriends have been African American. This man went to Morehouse with Spelman people. If he was all into Latino women, he shouldn't have gone to Morehouse, and he wouldn't have been across the street from Spelman. So I'm not buying it that Samson doesn't like African American women. I'm not buying that. But what I am buying is that what Samson didn't like, just like a lot of men on this show didn't like, they didn't like the loudness and the mouths of these women. Don't shoot me, ladies. Don't shoot me, because you was mad at Samson for not telling you the truth. You was mad at Samson for being fake and trying to pretend like he liked it and it was okay. And we know it really wasn't okay. So don't be mad at me now that I'm speaking the whole truth and I'm speaking for Samson. I'm going to be his representative, because Samson's a church boy. He's politically correct. He's curated. He's a life coach. He doesn't want to step on women's toes. He doesn't want to put women down. He doesn't want to say negative anything about anyone. So as a result, he looks like he's fake and he looks like he's lying. So I'm going to be the mouthpiece for Samson here today. Let's really get into it. If you look at a lot of complaints of the men this season, a lot of it has centered around the mouths of women. Let's talk about it. I'm not saying that these men was the best bunch of men either. So don't get me wrong on that, ladies. Don't get me wrong on that. But we're talking about Samson right now. And when you start to look at a lot of these men have had the same complaints, and it's about the mouths of the women. Even Lazy Randall talks about one of the problems he had with Jamala was her mouth and how she was, I don't know what he said about Jamala, but I think it was because of the way Jamala talked to him, and when she was upset, she didn't know how to calm herself, and she was kind of overly excited. I don't remember the words, but anyway, it was surrounding her speech, surrounding the way she spoke to people. It was surrounding that. It was something around that. Swayze and Kadian, same thing. It's surrounding the way she speaks. It's surrounding the way she talks. It's surrounding around the words that she chooses. Okay. So there has been a theme. Dominica, she's loud. She talks too loud. She's this, she's that. Now, was it with every woman on the show? No, it wasn't with every woman on the show, but it was surrounding around several women on the show. It was surrounding around several women on the show. It is very clear that Samson, when he walked into the room with these women, he didn't like a lot of the women. He didn't find a lot of the women his type. And I don't believe it's over because he was coming on the show expecting to see a bunch of Latino women. Samson has watched the show. And there is never a bunch of Latino women on Ready to Love. So if he expected to come on here and thinks he was going to find a lot of Afro-Cuban women or Latino women, he wouldn't have come. So I don't believe that was his expectation. I really don't believe that. I believe he just wasn't attracted to the women and they were not his type. But I also know that he recognized that there was no way that he could tell these women why he really wasn't interested in them without hurting their feelings. I don't think he could tell them, because I don't think that women could handle the truth. Because every time a man does speak the truth on why they're not interested in the woman attacks them. I really want women to start being okay when a man says she's not for him, because it's not the end of the world. There's nothing wrong of it, because as long as women can't accept it, when a man says, hey, you're not for me, then what happens is the Samsons of the world, they don't start telling people the truth. And then you don't grow, and then you don't learn, and then you don't know. I actually probably believe that this might be why Samson is still single out here for 48. I think Samson chooses the safe route, the politically correct route, the curated route of not really telling women why he isn't that into him, because he doesn't want to maybe hurt their feelings. He doesn't want to come off negative. He doesn't want to come off judgmental. And so what happens is he doesn't tell them the truth. Just like what happened with Sharice. I knew from the very beginning he didn't like Sharice. And I don't even know why Sharice was confused. Okay. I knew that he didn't like Sharice. And in fact, I knew that Sharice was just his last resort ditch effort to talk to Sharice. Because the truth of the matter is, he says that his first connections really were Looney and Shakira. Then after Looney and Shakira were eliminated, then what's he gonna do? He had to talk to Sharice. He had to find somebody else to talk to and go out on a date with. And that became Sharice. Sharice became the backup to Looney and Shakira. Now, what he also talks about is the fact that Looney, he learned very early on that Looney wasn't interested in him either, that Looney really was more into justice. He talked about Brandy. He learned very early on that Brandy wasn't really into him. Brandy was more into Mike. And we know that Shakira got eliminated. So there was two things going on. First of all, he didn't really like any of these men in the beginning. But of all the women that if he had to choose two of them, he chose Looney, Shakira, and Brandy. But none of these women liked him, because I think what these women knew instinctively is that he didn't really, really like them. And he was just choosing them because it was what he had to do. He's locked in the closet. He can't leave. The show has said, you are under contract. You can't leave. And what these women knew was that he don't really like me. He don't really like me. So they were not going to choose him because they knew that he didn't really like them. So in a lot of ways, I don't know what Samson should have done. If you walk into a room and you don't really like any of the women, you try to go home, they don't let you go home, right? Do you tell the women why you don't like them, or do you fake it and try to pretend like you like them and you don't really like them? And what he did was he faked it to make it, to try to pretend like he liked it, and he really didn't like them. Now, is that all his fault? No, because part of it is because of the way the show was set up, and part of it was because he wasn't allowed to go home. Now, what could he have done differently? Because everybody kept talking about this in the chats on the interview. Well, what could you have done differently? What could you have learned differently? I mean, if men aren't attracted to the women for whatever reason, looks wise, personality wise, I really don't know what he could have done differently besides fake it. He said he tried to get put off. He said when the women were telling him, you giving gifts to everyone on the show and no one is really special, basically saying we all equally disliked. People are running around talking about we all equally liked because we're giving us all gifts. Really what he was trying to say, no, you guys aren't all equally liked. You guys are all equally disliked. So the question becomes, then why didn't y'all vote him off? Why didn't they vote him off if everybody knew that he really wasn't into anyone? Because he was faking it? Because he was trying to pretend like he liked these women and he didn't really like these women? I don't know. There's enough blame to go around on this. Was he faking it? Was he faking that he liked women? Absolutely. Was he curated? Absolutely. Was he politically correct? Absolutely. But remember, the women also had the power to vote him off, and they didn't vote him off. And he wanted to go home. So I don't know who y'all need to be blaming out here. Is it the women's fault that they didn't vote him off sooner? Or is it his fault because he was faking it to make it because he wanted to go home and the producers wouldn't let him? Oh, whose fault is it? Or is it equally both people's fault? I know Samson is a life coach. You know, life coaches, they're supposed to uplift you, encourage you. So I can understand he wasn't going to be on here saying nothing mean and disparaging about any of these women. He's not going to try to look bad later on after this show with his church family or even in his business. He's like, oh, you're not going to get me on national TV, own network of all networks, I don't know if it's black owned anymore, but it got the Oprah Winfrey name on it. You're not going to have me come on no show and sit here and talk openly and disparagingly about a black woman. You're not going to do that to me in my career, in my life. Absolutely not. And he made the decision that I'd rather walk away from this experience and you thinking that I'm fake and I'm curated than for me to walk away from the experience and me telling you the truth on why I never liked any of these women. Because let me tell you, if he had really spoken the truth on why he didn't like a lot of these women, it might not have been a pretty answer. Because I'm telling you, when a lot of these men tried to tell women some of the truth behind why they were not the ones that were chosen, the women didn't take it well. They didn't take it well. And oftentimes what you find, because I have found it, reading comments, people talk to me, different things, is oftentimes when people are rejected, they find a reason for the rejection over something that they can't change. For instance, Samson didn't like any of the women because none of the women were Latina. Okay. Well, I don't think Samson expected a whole lot of Latina women to be on the OWN network with, 7 seasons of Ready to Love. And they never really had no bunch of Latina women. So I don't think that was his expectation. I think it's easy to say a man doesn't like me because I'm dark skinned. It's easy for me to say that because you know what I can't change? I can't change the color of my skin. So then I don't have to do anything different. I don't have to look any deeper into maybe my actions, my mouth, the way I move, the way I shake, my behavior. I don't have to look at any of those things. If I just say, you, Mr. So-and-so, don't like me because I'm dark skinned, now all the problem in the way you rejected me is more because of you, not me. Because I know I can't change my skin color, so I don't have to look any deeper. But if I said you rejected me over my mouth, my attitude, my personality, guess what? Then there's something on for me to have to change. And if I don't really want to do any work on myself, then it's easy for me always to say, I'm not chosen because I'm dark skinned. That's what I could do. I could do that my whole life. Oh, he didn't like me because I'm dark skinned. Now, is it true that some men may not like me because I'm dark skinned and they like lighter skinned women? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think the problem that we ran into on this show was that excuse was used for too many men. The excuse was used for Swayze that the reason why, because he so-called didn't date black women. And Swayze said, wait a minute. Sure, I've dated black women and I've dated Latina women. So if I reject a woman, I'm not just rejecting her because she's African American. I might be rejecting her for some other reason. But the reason why everybody wants to say is because she's African American or she's dark skinned. Same thing with Samson. Oh, he didn't like any of the women because he likes Latina women or he likes white women. And he cleared up. He said, no. The vast majority of my girlfriends have been African American. In fact, he went to Morehouse. Right across the street from Morehouse is Spelman. I don't think Spelman has a lot of Latina women there. So I don't think he has this thing where he only wants to date a Latina or a non-African American women. I just don't think. I think that is a convenient excuse to use when also some women don't want to take responsibility for some of the other reasons that they were rejected. And I'm telling you, a lot of these women were rejected over their mouths. And just like Samson said, he said he also doesn't like a woman who curses. Now, I'm going to say this about Looney. Looney was one of the top picks in terms of beauty of a lot of men. I watched all these interviews with like I said, I watched them with Randall. I watched them with Sampson now. I watched them with, who else? Justice, LJ. They all talked about Looney. That of all the women when they saw, it was Looney. Looney had a banging body. She was beautiful. And also they found out that Looney had good conversation. She was witty and she was funny. But let me tell you something. I also watched Looney's interview also with, I don't know if I watched the one with Little Black Book or Crystal XO, and Looney curses. She curses a lot, actually. And Samson said that one of the things that he didn't like in a woman was a woman who cursed. So I could see how even though initially he was attracted to Looney for her looks, for her body, and she had depth, and she was funny, he could have got turned off by the cursing. Now, does it matter? No, because Looney wasn't that interested in him either. But what I'm saying is that women have to look beyond and say, oh, I was just rejected because I'm dark skinned. I was just rejected because I'm not Latina. I was just rejected because I'm not a white. I was just rejected for this and that. Sometimes the things we're being rejected for are just not the physical appearance. It really isn't. And I think a lot of people do themselves harm when they don't look beyond that and they just chalk it up to that. Because one of the things I think that happened to Looney was that Looney was, I'm telling you, she was at the top of all these men's lists. But for some reason, towards the end, the only two real people really vying for her in the end became Justice, and it also became LJ. And we see who Looney chose. She chose to Justice as her number one. Of all the men that liked Looney, she chose Justice. If y'all go back to my review recap of Looney, you will see what I feel is one of the biggest issues going on with Looney, and that is the choosing of who she chooses to say yes to. Because one thing that Looney said in that interview, and I believed it then, and I even believe it now because every man has said it, is Looney has no shortage of men who approach her and want to be with her. But in the end, Looney is one of those women who has choices. Always has, still does. A lot of women can't attract the men and draw the men in like Looney can. Looney draws the men in. But now I'm seeing where Looney's a fatal mistake is. It is that once all the men are lined up and she has her pick of the man, of what she wants, which is the dream of every woman, Looney looks at the bunch of men and she picks the Justice. I really want y'all to go back and look at that video if you haven't watched the one I did. And I said, why, of all the people who like Looney, would she pick the Justice? Because what I said was Looney is dating her preference in terms of the fun, the outgoing, the wild person, the confusion, all that. Because part of that is Looney as well. She was attracted to that in Justice when actually Justice was the wrong type of man she needs. She actually needs a more stable guy to bring calmness and stability to her own life, right? But she chose the more exciting person. And so as a result, even a person like Samson, Looney ain't gonna like him. Samson's like this. He's vanilla. He's calm. He's stable. And that ain't gonna do it for Looney. So even though Samson might have liked Looney in terms of physically, her body, her looks, even parts of her personality, Looney was never going to say yes to Samson. And in the end, after a while, with Looney's mouth and that cursing, Samson was not going to be interested in Looney either. So really what I look at this season of with Samson is he dodged the truth the whole season. He could never really say that he was not interested in these women because the next question would be why? Okay, if Samson would have told the truth, because we all know he was lying the whole season. He was pretending to like these women. He didn't like the women. He was curated. He was politically correct. He was trying to spare people's feelings. Let's say he was doing all that. If he would have showed up real and authentic, then they would have said, well, why don't you like any of these women? And there was no way he would have wanted to tell the truth. Even on this interview, he avoided really saying anything wrong with a lot of people. Even when he was talking about Sharice, when we know, I knew from the very beginning, he was not interested in Sharice, not at all. But you know what the interesting thing happened with him and Sharice? Is because Sharice was actually a villain on the show. Didn't nobody like Sharice? No one liked Sharice. No one liked her mouth. No one liked her attitude. No one liked the way she bullied other women. No one liked the way she even had conversation with other men. No one liked Sharice. But all of a sudden, once Sharice and Samson became a couple, all of a sudden now, people look at Sharice as the victim of Samson. As if Sharice was a victim of Samson because Samson didn't tell Sharice the truth and that he really didn't like Sharice. He did not like Sharice. He did not like Sharice's mouth. He didn't like Sharice's attitude. He didn't like Sharice for the very things none of the other men didn't like Sharice. Okay, but what he did was he faked it to make it through the rest of the season. Now, if we want to not like him because of that reason, then that's okay. But lots of other men told Sharice the truth. Zoe told Sharice the truth. He was fake as hell. Mike told Sharice that he didn't like Sharice. All the other men told Sharice that they didn't like Sharice. But for some reason, because Samson lied and tried to pretend he liked Sharice, he became the bigger villain. Even on this interview, Samson tried to say, you know, Sharice is really a good person with a good heart. She just has a bad style of communication. I mean to tell you, that is politically correct. That is saying all the nice things when you think something differently. I want to say that maybe this is part of the reason why Samson even has been single for 48 years. Because I don't think Samson was just doing this on this show, Ready to Love. I think this is a part of what Samson does in dating. And I could see how this could lead to a single life. Because what Samson actually is doing is that he doesn't want to look like the mean guy. He doesn't want to look like the man who's putting women down. He doesn't want to look like the person who's being judgmental. He doesn't want to have any of those negative looks. So what he does is he could be dating a woman and not really telling her the truth. He could be dating her. The relationship isn't progressing anywhere, and the woman is asking him, you know what, we've been dating all this time, and he's not really telling her any negative stuff, but the woman is wondering, why aren't we progressing? And Samson really isn't telling her the truth. So by not telling her the truth, two things happen. One, even if she wants to correct some of the things about herself, she doesn't have an opportunity to correct it because she doesn't even know what bothers Samson. She doesn't even know what's turning Samson off about her. So that's one part. So she doesn't actually have a chance to be in relationship with him. See, communication and relationship, it needs a level of honesty. And there has to be two things that happen in a relationship. One is you have to be open to receive the honesty, and one, you have to be open to give the honesty. And one of the things I think about Samson is he isn't able to give some of that honest feedback to women, which makes women feel that authenticity from him. Now, the reason why he's not giving that honest feedback, some women, I think I saw in the comments, they think because he's trying to be perfect. He's trying to pretend like he's perfect. And I don't know, there may be some of that, but there's another part of it that I saw that Samson just wants to be the nice guy. He wants to have an image where he isn't the person that tears people down, because I think he is a life coach, and I think he thinks that would be a bad look for him. But that's not going to work in dating, because when you're with a partner in dating, you have to be able to go to your partner and say, hey, you know what? I really don't like that part about you. And even if the partner's feelings are hurt, at least it gives them an opportunity to change it. And without that honest feedback, people don't feel like they're getting the real you, and they also don't feel like they have a real shot. One of the things I think that happened with Sharice that she really disliked about Samson was that she wasn't getting a real shot because Samson really wasn't giving her any real feedback. One is because we know he didn't really like her. So he was like, I ain't gonna give this girl no real feedback, because what's the point? All I'm gonna do is look bad. But the second part of it was that she wanted this feedback. But the problem I had with Sharice was, I don't know why she needed that particular feedback from Samson, because she had received the same feedback from a lot of men. The very thing she was asking for Samson to give her, more of him, to open up and tell him his true feelings. When men did tell her the true feelings about why they didn't like her, she didn't want to receive it. So I think Samson says, you know what, why should I tell her the truth? She ain't receiving it from no one else. And that's the truth about Sharice. Sharice acted as if the thing going on with Samson was unique to Samson. That, you know what, he's not giving me any real feedback, so he's the problem. You know what, that was a problem, but Sharice was a real problem herself, all in of itself, without Samson. She really was a problem. And in the end, when they had that big blow up at the elimination and Sharice had to eliminate him, I think Samson was saying to himself, once again curated, but that time he couldn't hold it all in, was that of all the people who come to me and tell me I'm not ready to love, you bring the one person on the show that's probably really not ready to love, and that's Sharice. Samson was like, how are you going to bring someone here worse than me to tell me I'm not ready to love? He was offended. He said, you should have sent Brandy to tell me, or you should have sent someone else. How are you going to send a Sharice here to tell me I'm not ready to love? And we all know she's not ready to love. And here was the thing. Sharice was calling Samson out on his BS. And the truth of the matter is, she had a lot of BS to be called out on as well. And I think that's what disturbed Samson. He was like, here you are calling me out on all my BS. Because the BS she was calling Samson out on was the truth. But what he's saying is, in my lying to you, Sharice, here I was lying to you when all the other men were telling you the truth. And now you're going to come over here and call me out on my BS and tell me that I was lying. He was like, hell yeah, I was lying because you can't handle the truth. Because when all the other men were trying to tell you the truth, you didn't believe it then as well. He was like, the irony of it all, that I'm getting eliminated by one of the worst women on the show, and she's eliminating me because I'm not telling her the truth when she heard the truth from all the other men and she didn't want to hear that as well. It really was a crazy scene. But what ended up happening in that scenario is Charisse, who really was a villain throughout the show, Samson ended up being even just as much as a villain as Charisse, because people all of a sudden started saying about Samson that he strung Charisse along, that he didn't tell her the truth. And so as a result, he became a bigger villain than Charisse. It really was a crazy turnaround of all the events. The truth of the matter is, Samson was never interested in not one woman on this show. And even his attraction to, say, Shakira, or his attraction to Looney was going to be short-lived, because we all know that after a while, Shakira basically self-imploded on the show, but he didn't even want to admit that. He couldn't say anything bad about Shakira. He was not going to mess up her mental health. He was not going to say anything negative about Shakira at all. I'm telling you, through this whole interview, Samson refused to say anything negative too much about anyone. So I really don't know what Samson could have done differently. I mean, I know what he could have done differently. He could have spoke his truth. I mean, that is what he could have done on the show from the very beginning. He could have been one of the guys that said, hey, you know what? I'm not really interested in any of these women, and told the women the truth. But I think the risk of that would have probably been too great to his profession, his career, his business, and lots of different things. And I think what he decided to do was that the safe way to play this game was going to be to lie, not tell these women the truth, and hope I get eliminated as soon as possible. And unfortunately, he actually made it all the way to the end. He lied so well that they even kept him all the way to the end. But in the end, whose fault is that? Because the women had the power to eliminate Samson at any time they wanted to. So now the women have to ask themselves, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that he lied to you, he was disingenuous, he was fake, he was all this, but then you never voted him off. And then you also can't say he should have spoke the truth, but then when other men try to speak the truth and say things to women that were really unattractive about the women to the men, then you jump down the throats of the men. So I don't really know what people wanted from Samson. I don't know if they really wanted him to be real or if they wanted him to be fake. But I will say this, that Samson edited himself. He did not need an editor at all. He crafted and curated his entire performance on this show. But I think a lot of problems that happened with these women happened from the very beginning of this show, when that scene was set up for these women to meet all these men at this pool party. And that was the first time meeting all these men. And they were meeting these men in bathing suits and skimpy attire with a bunch of alcohol being served. And I think that was a bad light for all these women to first get introduced to these men. If you think about other seasons, it was a lot more class and sophistication to the first meeting. The women came nicely dressed in nice cocktail attire. Sure, they were serving wine. Sure, they were serving drinks. But when you are dressed nicely in a nice dress and some heels, you tend to behave differently. And these women let their guard down way too early and got way too comfortable with these men at that pool party sooner than they should have, as if they had known these men forever and that they was at some family reunion, a backyard barbecue party, and they let it all hang out. And I don't mean just let it all hang out with the butts and the boobs and the hips and the stomachs and whatever else. They let a lot of it hang out, and I'm telling you, it worked against them from the very beginning. But when I look at Samson, I look at a man who is 48 years old, never been married, never had any kids, and he's good looking, he's smart, he's intelligent, he's probably had a very good, successful career. You said, how does a man like this end up being single at 48? Just like people can look at the Charisses of the world and other women of the world and say, what happened along the way? we can easily say that something went awry because it is not what he wanted. I don't think Samson expected to be 48 years old, unmarried, no kids, never been married, any of that. And I think along the way with Samson is that I do think in his earlier years of dating, he was probably a very, very, very picky man. And he probably nitpicked a lot on women and women's flaws. That I really do believe. I do believe that this quest for perfection, curated, saying all the right things, doing all the right things in every occasion, sort of like a perfect little package with a bow on it. I think he had that standard not only for himself, I think he probably had that standard for women. And so what would happen probably was when he would meet women and he would see flaws in those women, he would then say, it's not a characteristic I like. It's not something that I would like. And maybe what he didn't do was maybe he didn't voice that with women, or maybe he voiced it too much. But you do get this sense from Samson that he does have this level of maybe perfection or of curating his sort of involvement with people to the point of perfection and sort of like a pretty bow and everything. And we just know no one is perfect. Relationships aren't perfect. People don't always do and say the right things. So if that is a standard that he imposed on women, I could see how at 48, he never found a woman good enough and who could rise to the level or standard that he wanted or that he expected. And so as a result, he probably has been looking for that all of his life. And now here he is, 48, realizing, wow, this perfect woman doesn't really exist. And so now, what do I do now? What do I accept? Because perfection just doesn't exist. I think that is one of the things that has happened with Samson. And in addition to that, I think another part of it, because he expects perfection from other women, more so than maybe he should have, I think he also has that standard for himself. And then what happens is he doesn't want to show his own flaws. So it really acts like a double-edged sword. One is you're sort of not willing to accept some of the flaws of women. And then because you have a level of perfection, you don't want others to see your flaws. So you're rejecting women, but you're also not being real and authentic coming to the relationship. So to correct some of this with Samson, he really would have to correct it on the both ends. He would have to start saying, hey, maybe I need to not lower my standard. I know people don't want to hear that, lower my standards, but that may be something that he needs to do. And then maybe he also needs to let himself off the hook and say, it's okay for me to show some of my flaws, because being flawed is human. And oftentimes flaws are what endears us to people. So there's nothing wrong with showing your flaws. And I think that that would make him seem more real. That would make him seem more authentic, right? And then that would also allow him to come into more honest communication with women, because when he's able to show his flaws, he's also then able to maybe talk more honestly about, maybe some things he sees in other women. Because listen, you can't come to people and tell them about their flaws when you're not even willing to expose or show your own flaws, because that becomes hypocritical. So as long as you're hiding behind this perfect wall and this perfect veneer that you're perfect, you absolutely can't come forth and start telling people about their own flaws. You've got to be willing to expose yourself if you want to then ask for change from other people. So he's got to do both. He's got to be willing to expose his own flaws before he can even start asking for change for other women. But on this show, I believe he decided from the very beginning, I don't like none of these women. Not at all, not at all, not at all. And I'm going to just fake it until I make it. I'm not going to really tell these women why I don't like them, because if I do really tell them why I don't like them, I'm going to be called judgmental. I'm going to be called uppity. I'm going to be called bougie. I could imagine all the things he would have been called if he would have really told these women how he really felt. So as opposed to be called uppity, bougie, stuck up, all these other kind of things, he became not telling the truth, and he became called fake. Samson wasn't going to win. There was no way a Samson was going to come out of this winning, because it's what's they call it? 6 in one hand, 6 in the other. You're either going to be called bougie, You either become called bougie, pretentious, uptight, or whatever, or you're going to be called a fake and phony. And he came out being called a fake and phony. So that's it, y'all. Anyway, that's my review. What do y'all think about Samson interview? If you watched it, I know it's been a little bit while before when it aired, but drop down in the comments and let me know what y'all think. I'll talk to you later. Bye.